Welcome to Aircast, where we feature military leaders, discuss Air Force ROTC along with our experiences, and uncover the latest in defense and Air Force news. I'm your host, Cadet Captain Parker Lozier, and without further ado, let's get into our segments. Lights on.
In this episode of Aircast, we'll have Cadet Lambert giving her military news segment, and then we'll transition into an interview with myself and Lieutenant Eisenson, who is currently at undergraduate CISO training in Naval Air Station, Pensacola. That being said, over to Cadet Lambert.
Welcome to the military news segment, covering the latest in military aviation and defense news. I'm Cadet Lambert, and today we're highlighting some big developments across the Air Force, from a powerful new addition in refueling to improving relocation support and exciting new opportunities for language training. Let's dive into our top stories. First up, a big addition to the Air Force Test Pilot School. 3 new A-29 Super Tucano aircraft have joined the school's fleet. These aircraft bring a lot to the table, giving pilots hands-on training with different types of aircraft capabilities. The additions of the A-29s allow the school to expand its training and offer a wider range of testing options. This means that test pilots are better prepared to handle a variety of scenarios they may encounter in real-world missions. Meanwhile, the Air Force is also getting ready for a major exercise next summer. Planning is underway for the Mobility Guardian 25, which will be held in the Indo-Pacific region. This large-scale event will bring together allies and partners to strengthen air mobility and cooperation. With partners from around the world, Mobility Guardian is all about working together effectively in challenging environments and is a chance for the Air Force to demonstrate its agility and readiness. Now, let's head over to the Central Command area, where the Air Force's latest refueling aircraft, the KC-46A Pegasus, has arrived on the scene. In early October, the first ever KC-46A Expeditionary Air Refueling Squadron was set up to operate in the region. The unit deployed with only 72 hours notice, but they were fully prepared thanks to support from multiple teams at Joint Base McGuire-Dix Langhurst in New Jersey. The KC-46A has several advantages over older refuelers. It has greater fuel capacity, enhanced connectivity, and it is equipped for aeromedical evacuations. This deployment marks the beginning of sustained operations for the KC-46A in CENTCOM, where it will play a crucial role in supporting U.S. and coalition forces. Major Andrew Dionitz, commander of the 305th Expeditionary Air Refueling Squadron, called this deployment a team effort and said it is exciting to be part of something that shows just how strong the Air Force's air refueling capabilities are. The KC-46A has a big job in extending the reach of air operations, making it a powerful addition to the team. Finally, in news about language and cultural skills, the Language-Enabled Airman Program, or LEAP, is now open to select members of the Air National Guard. The Air Force Culture and Language Center has partnered with the Air National Guard to allow 14N officers and certain enlisted members to apply to LEAP. This program helps airmen develop language skills that can be essential for missions requiring cultural awareness and effective communication. This new opportunity comes after years of LEAP being limited to active duty airmen, though Guard members could participate in limited capacity if they had previously been active duty. Lieutenant General Carlos Chavez, a top Air National Guard officer, emphasized how important LEAP has been in helping airmen work effectively with allies around the world. This expanded access to LEAP means that Guard members in specific career fields can now apply directly, develop valuable language skills, and participate in language utilization missions. The Air Force anticipates that 10 to 20 new airmen will join LEAP in this first year, helping build a language-ready force for future operations. Chief Master Sergeant Seth Randleman from the National Guard Bureau praised the expansion, highlighting that it will support national security missions by creating a culturally skilled force ready to work side by side with partners and allies. That's all for today's military news segment. We will continue to bring you the latest in military aviation and defense news, so stay tuned.
Hey Aircats, Cadet Lozier here with Lieutenant Eisenson, a graduate from Detachment 665. Lieutenant Eisenson, please introduce yourself.
Lieutenant Eisenson, graduated in 2023 down here at NES Pensacola, wrapping up CISO training.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Aircast, Lieutenant Eisenson. Going straight into it, what is a combat systems officer?
A combat systems officer, or a CISO, is a aircrew. We are normally what you'd call a backseater. We run all the weapon systems, sensors, and electronic warfare systems, as well as some navigation for different aircraft and different platforms. So there's a bunch of different aircraft where pilots are, on the stick flying the planes, and we are managing just about everything else on the mission side. And so the pilot's normally the aircraft commander, and we are normally the mission commander, a lot of platforms. We have different shred outs as CISOs, being weapon systems, special operations CISOs, and EWOs primarily. We still a few NABs kicking around the Air Force, but in some platforms, it's going to be doing a lot of things to back up the pilot, and we're a lot more familiar with systems such as knowing how to run a radar or the tactical jamming systems. Really, we speak a lot of the languages that the pilots don't mess around with too much. They're a lot more focused on being on the controls, direct with ATC, for example. And we'll be running a lot more the very specialized mission sets that the aircraft, such as MC-130s, RC-135s, F-15E, additional weapon systems are focused on.
Can you give us a quick overview of combat systems officer training where you're at right now at Naval Air Station Pensacola, kind of what it entails start to finish?
Yeah, so the training is always changing and updating. There are different roles, but for the most part, specifically with the training, you go through you're going to be on casual for a little while, going to get a simple base job before you start training. But once you start up, it's going to be a lot of ground training, more of understanding, general aviation concepts before you move into a few sims, what we call CISO fundamentals, learning how to run a radar and do a lot of the navigation side that is essential to being the CISO in the backseat of the T6 before you go on and flying the T6. And at that point, a lot of the times for our training here, we do a lot with the pilots, but the pilots kind of act as like a voice automated autopilot. There is CRM involved, but you're trying to direct them and coordinate and do all the mission planning and accomplish whatever that is. So we're very mission planning heavy, whereas a lot more of the UPT guys are a lot more on the flying and execution heavy side of things.
So you mentioned that general aviation background and knowledge, understanding those key fundamentals, along with learning crew resource management and learning how to operate your radar and your simulators and stuff like that. What other skills are emphasized the most during your training?
A lot of the things you're going to be working with deal with CRM, making sure you can communicate, and they're going to be teaching you all of the methods in which to be quick and efficient with how you pass along vital information as possible. Say right now I'm flying a lot on the T1 and doing threat reactions as an EWO. It's going to be very directive, demonstrating as far as CRM, how to get your pilot to do exactly what you need to do in the most efficient method possible. CRM is not just techniques. It's also about what you have agreed to and have talked and coordinated with your crew ahead of time and the contracts you've made. And it all starts in the briefing room.
We talked about the brief overview of UCT. What's the structure as far as initial entry to tracking either the T1 or the continue with a T6 or another aircraft, and then ultimately finding your airframe?
So it's constantly changing. They're going back to a single track system. So I'm going to be one of the last people to ever touch a T1 before they go to the graveyard at the end of this year. But any future CISOs can expect to come in, do a bunch of ground training, go for the T6s, and at some point after that, either before or after T1s, then drop to a specific airframe. There will still be the roles, say, of electronic warfare, WISO, weapon systems, or special operations, but it does go back and forth on how they organize that and how they allocate different aircrafts.
So what would that single track look like?
It would be after T6s. Again, they are doing away with T1s right now, so it's probably going to be replaced with a bunch of sims and at some point tracking after that.
Lieutenant Eisenson, what strategies would you recommend for standing out during training and securing your preferred airframe? And this question comes from the Honorable Cadet Medley.
It's the same as anything. If you're just looking to make yourself stand out, it's not going to do you any good. The only way you make it through, say, T6 training is with your flight mates. I don't know how many times somebody had to go over ROMI products, or you steal your buddy's flight plan because you had no sleep the night before and you're going into a check ride. You're not going to get through the training all by yourself. I mean, standing out, a lot of it is just being very good at the basics and not trying to rush through, the simple concepts. Don't try and do anything too fancy. You got plenty of time to get good at what they're looking for.
What other ways are you and your classmates working together towards success? I'm sure there's a lot of study sessions. How does that fit into your schedule?
I mean, it depends on what phase of training you're in, but going through, they will be the people you spend, sometimes 12 hours out of your 24 hours in a day with. So get used to them. If you're in a skiff with the same people, secured facility, you have no connection to the outside world for 10 hours straight because you're in a windowless building doing academics or sims or prepping for flights, then you really do manage a lot more of working with the people around you, because tensions get high sometimes after a long day, and especially when everybody's flying or stressed out. So a lot of that is knowing who you can trust and backing up your wingman.
What are the most challenging aspects of scissor training, and how did you work through them?
As you go through different phases of training, there's going to be really long, stressful weeks. You're going to have to, problem solve on the fly, try and find innovative ways to do new things, whether it's say cross country and you don't have any of the products, you need to figure out how you're going to get from one airfield to the other without avoiding all this weather that's popping up. Just taking a lot of the concepts that you brief on PowerPoint and then translating them into the real world and adapting when nothing goes to plan. So
how do you balance the demands of your scissor training with work-life balance needs, such as daytime, downtime, and recovery, and going to the gym and stuff like that? What's your day-to-day like currently?
I mean, so you got to find your routine. There's a lot of people who really struggle with this. What I would say is what always worked for me was same things that got me for college, is having, a crazy as it is to say, a bedtime, getting enough sleep, then also finding time to still do the things that keep you sane. For me, that's going to the gym, doing jiu-jitsu. I know people who started reading a ton of books when they hit the blight line and were always stressed. You got to find a way to take your mind out of it and do the things that you still enjoy. And that's with anything. If you are completely overloaded, but you don't find any time for yourself, then, you might spend more time on that exact job, but it's not going to be as valuable as the time you would have if you were just struggling through it with no mental break or any downtime as well.
How do your training experiences in the T6 Texan differ from those in the T1?
They're very different aircraft. And so I have a very different role in the T1 as an EWO student versus everybody's just the backseat CISO in the T6. So I am much more mission focused in the T1. a lot of my job is threat prevention, doing jamming, prepping, and dropping bombs on our theoretical target leg and reactions. A WISO student might see a lot more as a role as more of a co-pilot in that sense of actually doing a lot more of the flying, and that's very similar to what you're doing in a T6.
As someone who's been selected to track EWO, can you speak to the EWO side of things?
EWO, a lot of our job is understanding the threats of enemies, and say a lot of the EWO platforms, specifically say RC-135s, are collecting signal data on different threats so that we can utilize them and integrate them into, say, a force package down the road. So that is really like integrating the what we call SIGINT, or signals intelligence, and whatever we can collect on enemy SAM systems, ADA, their radars, really lets us know how we can penetrate air defenses in the future. And with systems such as, say, Link 16, I won't go into all that, but I'll just say you as an ELO are responsible for learning and understanding how our enemies' defenses work, how we can exploit them, not just, say, the fighters and bombers that are going to go in down the road, but how you can also exploit them to defend yourself when you are threatened. As far as EWO platforms, right now we are sending people to RC-135s, RQ-170s, which is let me pull up the Air Force fact sheet so I don't say anything I'm not supposed to. I'm pretty sure I will say it is a low observable drone. Yeah, I'll stick with that. It is a low observable drone. You can look it up. I will say nothing more to not get myself in trouble. And there is another system flying out of Beale Air Force Base you can go to.
Of those, what would you say your top pick is?
You have the different opportunities at, say, RC-135s. We have different variants, and they each have a different mission. And then you also, again, have great opportunities building out for the new platforms for electronic warfare. That's really the future of a lot of our combat coming up. We're integrating EWO systems, like AESA radars, into all of our newest fighters, and it is really going to be the future of how we integrate into combat. RC-135s, RQs, or the other system at Beale are what I'm going to be happy with any of them. Nothing happens without some electronic warfare support for the most part. When you really think about it, RC-135s are how we collect on a lot of data going in and knowing electronic warfare assets are everywhere. Say, if it comes beforehand where B-2s were striking Houthis in Yemen, I guarantee you had some assets, maybe RC-135s flying around the border. For the past months, we have maybe drones flying around somewhere. We are collecting on data, because even if they're not directly on that strike, then they're the ones mapping out where those SAM systems are, what their capabilities are. So say our B-2 and our low observable bombers, fighters, anything, don't get lit up on a radar, because, B-2s are hard to see, but it's low observable. It's not invisible. And that's only from if you are utilizing them the right way. So a lot of that comes into the planning. Then you have electronic warfare support. Say that's where a EC-130 comes in, or the E-37 comes in. Communications jamming. They can basically shut down a lot of those comms anytime we are coming into an area. And then you also have RCs play some roles as far as that goes. There's a lot of integrations. You have the EA-18s that the Navy flies that can essentially have the enemy fighters completely blind on radar. And we have some new capabilities with that for few of our aircraft now as well. So it's everything on the electronic spectrum is something that we try to take advantage of. That's the whole great thing about the integration of new 5th gen fighters is we don't have to get into dogfights. Ideally, we are controlling that entire spectrum before anything ever becomes a threat to us in air battle.
So we mentioned, CISOs, EWOs, and WISOs. What do you know about being a navigator / sensor operator? Like, what does their training look like? Because I know you've tracked EWO. Do you have can you speak on being a navigator?
So nav is kind of the basis for what all CISOs and what the career field of CISO became. But for the most part, we don't train very many navs for the Air Force anymore. A lot of them are the older navs from different platforms, say C-130s before they moved to the J model. There's a few jumping around. They still have them for RCs, but they're taking them from the AWACS, I believe. So we don't have too many navs left over, but for special operations CISOs, then they are going to be in platforms, primarily the MC-130, which has a lot of really cool missions, especially helicopter refueling. They fly a ton of low levels, getting the special operations forces in and out of austere environments. You have the AC-130s. So, I have plenty of instructors who have described their life as basically a game of Call of Duty. Same thing as the U-28. Really cool mission set. Won't touch on too much in here. So that's going to be a lot of the special operation roles. The nabs are pretty similar to a lot of what you would expect. It's pretty quiet. They don't have to do too much until something breaks, and then the pilots are really glad they have them. We do have inertial systems and also give similar data to GPS, but real part of where training everybody in navigation that pilots don't get nearly as much in is helpful is if war ever comes down with China, then we know the first thing they're going after is our satellites, and GPS is probably the first thing we're going to lose.
Lieutenant Eisenson, do you have any memorable training experiences that you would like to share?
I mean, I've got plenty of fun stories from training down here. Starting out, Pensacola's pretty good deal as far as comparing it to the UPT bases on the beach, always having the Blue Angels flying over. But when you really think about it, it's a lot of fun to just get out of here, land at a local airfield, refuel, and then go out and on an out and back or fly around. What they don't tell you is that when you're buying jet fuel for the Air Force, normally the servicing agencies will give you free lunch and all the amenities while you go and do your mission planning, like a weather divert where we landed in New Orleans for the night, and was not at all expecting that, but it was a fun little escape before we went back and heads down into mission planning for the next day. So
we talked about this before on a phone call back in the day. Can you describe the weather you were experiencing on your file approach?
No, we weren't planning on New Orleans that day at all. Let's just say clouds formed and came all around us, and we were flying in very much what I would describe as instrument meteorological conditions. There was a part in there where me and my buddy both thought we were gonna, end up in the water for a moment trying to land that ILS, but no, they got us down safely. We got pretty good pilots.
The best of the best. What's something like that? What's an important lesson that you took away from that?
Yeah, we drill bold-face off limits to the death, because you really do need to be prepared at any moment for, say, T6 they always say single engine mentality. So the second one thing goes wrong, you really only have a few seconds before everything else goes wrong. And it's really the decisions you can make if you can stay calm, to back up your crew, to keep everybody safe and get you home safely.
What advice would you give some cadet interested in pursuing a rated career field or becoming a CISO?
I mean, it's kind of like we always touch on. You just start with the basics. You don't need to go into any rated training having this background in engineering or math or doing anything. They'll teach you everything you need to know along the way. you got to be willing to still go in and learn and be willing to sit down, put your head down and study, because there's going to be some long days, but it's a lot of fun, and you get really close with the people you're working with every day.
We hope that you've enjoyed this production of Aircast, presented to you by your Detachment 665 Fall Semester 2024 Public Affairs Team. Air Power.